Hello, this is Darrell Castle with today's podcast. Today is Friday, September 12th, 2014. And on today's podcast, we're going to discuss the president's speech given Wednesday night, September 10th, in which he laid out his strategy for dealing with the Islamic State, his strategy laid out for the American people. The president spent some early time refreshing our collective memory about what he has accomplished in the Middle East and reminding us that as Commander-in-Chief, his highest priority is the security of the American people. He also reassured us that, quote, America is safer. On that point, the American people seem to disagree. According to an NBC News and Wall Street Journal poll, 47% of Americans say that the country is less safe now than before 9/11. The fear level has spiked dramatically, up from 28% just a year ago to now 47%. It could be said that we are cowering in fear of these people. But the purpose of the speech was to announce his strategy, as I said, to degrade and ultimately destroy the terrorist group known as ISIL. That's a direct quote from the speech. That is his strategy. I've had a great deal of criticism in the last few weeks for him because he said he had no strategy. But strategy and tactics are different. I'm all for not announcing your strategy. It's a foolish mistake to announce to your enemies what you are planning to do to them. But not announcing and not having are two different things. Strategy is usually an evolving overall thing. It is a set of national priorities and interests that often extend beyond one presidential administration and sometimes across many. But the tactics of how that strategy is employed will change with the realities of the day. Now, back to the speech. Essentially, the strategy hasn't changed much from the speech at the NATO summit a week ago. Except for one thing there, he said his highest priority was to make sure that Iraq had a functioning government. The United States intends to treat Syria and Iraq as a single battle space, attacking from the air at will across both countries. This is in essence what the president said. I personally have no problem whatsoever with attacking this group wherever it is to be found in the world. But I do criticize the Constitution belittling and destroying stance of the president's position that he needs no congressional approval. He must know that Congress would grant approval to make war on our enemies. He just doesn't want to submit himself to any other authority, whether the rule of law requires it or whether it does not. Every time this president has a chance to do something great and perhaps undo some of the damage he has done, he whiffs on the shot. If you'll pardon the golf analogy, I know he would appreciate it. As to Syria, that was another opportunity wasted. He could have explained that, number one, attacking ISIS in Syria is not the same as attacking Syria, but since he has chosen to do it without the support of the Syrian government, it is the same as attacking Syria. And that, in my opinion, is a big mistake. The U.S. will support and arm Syrian rebels. This has been done before. Those weapons make their way to ISIS. And so we arm and train our enemies just as we have done before. The Syrian rebels have no anti-aircraft defense system, but the Syrian government does. So Syrian anti-aircraft systems have to be targeted, which puts us at war with Syria. How stupid is that? What do we care if Assad runs Syria? Now, there is no carrier battle group in the Mediterranean and none on its way. I don't want to second-guess our admirals, but that seems really odd to me. Perhaps anti-ship missiles explains it. No boots on the ground. The U.S. is not about to commit its own rapidly diminishing combat forces to ground combat against ISIS. Many people say that is the only way to defeat them. Many generals say that. However, U.S. air power cannot be used effectively without a rescue system for downed pilots and aircrew. Helicopters must operate from forward bases, and they must be protected. We know that the U.S. has many special forces already there on the ground, embedded with Kurdish and Iraqi units. No boots on the ground, I guess, means no U.S. military except special forces, and for some reason, they don't seem to count. It also doesn't mean civilian contractors. They don't count either. But I suspect there are many on the ground and will be many more in the future. I also suspect that the plane full of contractors that landed in Iran the other day, the one that suddenly disappeared from the news that you could find nothing about, was on its way to Iraq. But I admit that is just speculation on my part. Now, finally, in the early part of the president's speech, he led with his biggest whopper, his biggest lie. He led with it early, and a dramatic one, and a damaging one at that. How can we fight what we don't know about, folks? How can we make war on people we don't even know who they are? Quote from the speech, a direct quote now. Let's make two things clear, the president said. ISIL is not Islamic. No religion condones the killing of innocents, and the vast majority of ISIL's victims have been Muslim. Well, that is a blatant lie, or even worse in the president, woeful ignorance. The Islamic State is far more qualified to speak for what Islam is than President Obama. In fact, Islam does condone and even encourages the killing of innocents. Just read the Quran. It's all in there. The Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, Sharia are all true and faithful representations of what Islam really is. That is Islam. We must admit that and identify jihadist Islam as a whole, as the threat and as the enemy and the target, and forget all the politically correct nonsense. At least that's the way I see it, folks. Until next time, this is Darrell Castle. Thanks for listening.